everybody, I'm Suzanne. In today's video, I'm going to do a little, basically it's an ALLA PRIMA piece. It's an 8 by 10 on a super slick gessoed panel. And it's of a bird species called the Marbled Godwit. Now, I am very, very fortunate to have a friend in Vancouver, British Columbia, who is an amazing photographer. His name is Geoffrey Shuen. And he has shared his photo references with me in the past, and he is very generous enough to let me continue using them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the painting, and I'm going to show you the reference, I'm going to show you the reference too that I use. So here is the painting, and these are Marbled Godwits. And a Marbled Godwit is it's a shorebird, but it winters in the Northwest, really, or I'm sorry, it summers in the Northwest, and it's more of a marshy bird, but then they winter down here, kind of where, well, not in Tennessee, because we don't have a whole lot of waterfront property, but they go to places like North and South Carolina and those type of areas where they have lots of marsh and lots of just habitat for them. So it's a little bird you'd see poking around, and I just love Geoffrey's eye. Geoffrey just is an amazing photographer, and I'll show you the reference that I used. And you can tell I kind of diverged a little bit from the original reference, but although I think the reference was perfect, I really do. And again, so here is the piece, and we're going to go ahead and jump into this piece. I will cover it's going to be mostly a time lapse. So this is a super, super short video, but I'll call out what I'm doing. You'll see that I start the painting, and basically I use just a paint that goes on first as a wash. It is a transparent yellow that is, oh goodness gracious, it was Indian yellow, and I used Michael Harding's Indian yellow and did a transparent wash, wiped out the birds, then very carefully just kind of sketched them in, and then just started going with it. So sit back and watch, and if you have any questions, you know what to do. Go ahead and leave it in the comments section. Go ahead and like this video and subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this little painting of Marbled Godwits. So I start off with this yellow wash. It's just the Indian yellow wash. Lots and lots of Gamsols used here because I got to keep it wet. And since I am working on a super slick substrate, which is a nice gessoed panel, I use just a clean paintbrush. Nothing on it, maybe a little paint thinner. And you can see, use whatever you want. I'm using Q-tips here. You can use a paper towel around your finger, another clean brush, but I'm trying to just get out the shapes and the basic composition that I wanted to set up for this piece. And I'm basing it mainly off of Geoffrey Shuen's photograph, but yeah. So I started it off too big, and that's the beautiful part of doing or starting off a piece like this, because you can still do it a la prima, just kind of on the fly, but you're not committed to a lot of materials this way. And I'm kind of getting the shape and getting a little bit smaller because I do want to include that awesome, just that reflection, because it creates a lot of that negative space that I crave in any of my paintings. So, I'm just kind of getting that loose start into this piece. And why I decided to go in amongst the shapes with the yellow, Indian yellow, I'm not really sure what my brain was thinking, other than I had that on the palette, because I end up covering that up later. But I'm just, again, making my shapes a little bit more solid, knowing full well that I'm not going to be using that background as, that color as my background. I wanted to have that color in there mainly to create that kind of that glow that you might have if you were looking at these birds in that type of light outside by a marsh. And I'm just loving it. So here I'm just, using the basic colors that make up these birds, and it was basically Italian brown umber, titanium white, raw sienna, raw umber, and that's, it's a very minimal amount of colors. So the background I mixed here using a pale violet by Michael Harding along with titanium white and a little bit of umber, and it just made an interesting kind of purpley gray. And you can see even just this first pass, you can see that beautiful yellow kind of shining through, and I am so digging that. I knew that, at first I was a little unsure if by using that yellow, if that was going to be a wise choice, but it was what I was going for. And I'm just smoothing it out. Didn't necessarily want a lot of that thick alla prima type, impasto type paint strokes in the back. But using this wet background, I'm able to get those soft edges that I like. And since this bird is the one that's a little bit more distant than the other birds in space, it's not that, they're all pretty much grouped together, but I wanted to really capture the opportunity, to grab that opportunity to do the soft edges when I can. So I'm popping in the detail. Here the brush I'm using here happens to be a Princeton Velvet Touch pointed round. It's a number 10. This was given to me by Scott from Jerry's Artorama in Knoxville, Tennessee. If you're curious about ordering from him, especially if you're local, you go to yourartsupplies.com, and that's where you pick up Scott's. Scott's awesome. He always gives me lots of freebies to try. Love my freebies. So here I'm using this is a rosemary flat that happens to be a evergreen flat. And you can see I'm switching around between my brushes, between this pointed round and the evergreen flat. So I'm getting in the details. I'm really not, how can I say it? You can see the brushes I'm using. I'm just going back and forth between those two brushes, and I pretty much do that through the whole painting, except for when I'm just softening edges. So the color, I have a very limited color palette here. If you look at the background, you can see my friends are playing with the dog. So sorry for the distraction, but there's always fun stuff happening in my studio at any given time. Well, this type of stuff is happening. I'm painting and my dog's having a ball with his friends, living his best life. But, I'm starting in on getting some of the, just the plant life that's in here and the reflections. And this, like I said, folks, this is basically a very alla prima piece. Everything's nice and wet, so I have to kind of work. I could have used my paint scraper to scrape out some of the area here so I didn't have so much blend. I opted not to, but it was okay. So I'm actually hitting it up back with the background color again, just kind of firming up some of this, these colors and making sure it's not overly blended. I don't want it to be blendy, but I'm just poking it in here and there. Again, just using those same two brushes that you saw me start with. Now, eventually I may actually switch to a sword brush by Rosemary, because that is a great way to do the little things like the twigs and bits of stuff that you see in the background. Same with some of the feathers and the other little lines. But obviously I'm doing a lot with just this one little brush. And I'm already starting to kind of get into some of the detail on the birds, getting those soft edges where I can, working the edges a little bit. And the nice thing about this this paintbrush that I'm using now, it's mainly a watercolor brush, honestly, but it works well for some of these smaller pieces like this that I'm working on, especially on that slick substrate, because if you're working on a slick substrate, you have to use a softer brush, or you just end up making too many, dig lines from a coarser bristled brush would make on this kind of surface. And just getting a little bit of detail in. Again, this brush is doing the trick. You can see I'm just barely touching it. And, putting that in front of the bird, giving a little bit more depth in the piece so you can kind of realize where things are in space. And, I'm just kind of working the foliage, if you will, the sticks and twigs and things that stick up in the water that these birds might encounter if they were, digging around. And here you just have to appreciate looking at this palette, because the palette, you can see there's burnt sienna, there's raw umber, little yellow ochre, ivory black, titanium white, Now there's the background color, folks. That is you can see the little bit of the pale violet there that went into making it. So it's interesting when you look at the palette like this, and then you look at the painting itself. The painting almost seems monochromatic, but obviously it's really not. But it's a very low amount of color that has gone into this. It's very it's a simple palette, really. And this has been a really fun piece to do, I have to say. I'd like to do more like this, and I have to say I was very impatient in getting it into the frame, and I wanted to just get it on the wall and get it done, and here it is. I really enjoyed this, and you can appreciate the colors in the background, and when you zoom in, you can still see that yellow shining with the purpley background and the soft edges on these birds. This is what I was going for. You could see where I wanted to have the harder edges on the backs of the bird, where it's, especially the middle bird. You can see that hard edge on the back, and it just distinguishes this bird from the other birds and its background. But in some ways, you want some of them to kind of be a little misty and softened in the edges, and so you can really appreciate the strokes here. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope that you'll go ahead and consider subscribing if you're not a subscriber. And if you have any questions, you know what to do. Just go ahead and add it in the comment section. All the negative space of this piece, all this, this space, all these little spaces like this, and just even the reflection in the water was very simple. What's crazy is the palette itself looked very diverse, but the birds themselves and the colors almost seem very, very monochromatic, not monochromatic, but just low amount of color. And it was all the blending. So it just kind of worked out really well. I had fun with this piece. And quite frankly, folks, I would love to do more like this because it just was so much fun. What can I say? That is the piece of the Godwits. Told you that would be a fast video. I'd say the total time for doing this painting might have been, because I started it on a Wednesday, finished it on a Thursday, and I started it late in the afternoon. And I say it's alla prima because it really was wet on wet. The paint really didn't have time to dry, and I needed the wet edges. So, especially the bird in the distance, the one over here, you can see I really did try to keep a soft edge as much as possible. And yeah, this was really fun. It's interesting to appreciate the palette of colors that went into creating this painting. Seemed very diverse, but really this actually comes out looking very monochromatic, and that's all with mixing. So the background, the color in the background, of course, you barely see it, but a little bit of that that wash that I put on of the Indian yellow shows through, and I made a gray, almost a white, but it's a very light gray with a pale violet by Michael Harding and titanium white and just a little bit of yellow, and it kind of blended nicely into the wash that I had in the background. And I like that the little bit of that yellow is poking through, because it gives you that feel of, I don't know, just that sun you might see on the marsh, right? So again, thank you so much for joining me. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you know what to do. Leave it in the comments section. Go ahead and smash that like button for me. I really do appreciate it if you can do that. And subscribe if you're not a subscriber. I also have a mentorship program on my YouTube channel. And if you're needing like a painting coach, hit me up. You can join my membership program here on YouTube. And with that, I'm going to give you direct contact with me. If you need to have me do a little bit of critiquing of your work, maybe tell you how you can improve a certain piece or whatever, that's what I can help you with on that mentorship program. So look into it, okay? So from Kingsport, Tennessee, I want to say thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.